On 15th June 2019, I released a video titled, "Why Ruto Will Win 2022 Elections." I received a lot of beatings from Kieleweke before it morphed into Azimio, including very close friends of mine. But in the video, I analyzed the situation. I looked at the factors and I said, Kieleweke of Uhuru and Raila were going to lose on the BBI thing. And that would then embolden Ruto. I also talked about the blunders associated with Raila as a candidate. And I said if there was going to be a repeat of the same blunders, then Ruto was going to win the election. Today, on the 8th day of February 2025, I released a video titled, "Why Ruto Will Win the 2027 Elections." I draw parallel with what happened in 1992, after the struggle for the second liberation that claimed many lives, that so many figures get detained, many people maimed, many people sent into exile, and many people detained. After the struggle that made many people lose their jobs, with a handful of people losing their families because their spouses could not take it. After all this struggle, at the collapse of the Berlin Wall and the new wind of change that brought multipartyism to Africa, Kenya included, in particular for this country, after the repeal of Section 2A that had made Kenya a one-party state by law, and after parties were formed and registered legally, Kenyans breathed a sigh of relief and said, at last, to copy a bit from Martin Luther King, free at last, free at last. Many saw the end of the Moi era. To many Kenyans, it was the end of KANU, chama ya baba na mama. Many people saw Moi going home, his head down in shame. We looked back and saw the destruction wrought by KANU from the days of the Jomo Kenyatta and Daniel Arap Moi. And we looked up and said, thank you, God. At last, we're birthing a new Kenya. It was never to be. First, the opposition allowed itself to fall into the trap of Moi. The main opposition party was Ford, with Jaramogi Oginga Odinga as the natural head and leader. Some superficial war started, pitting Jaramogi and Kenneth Matiba. After the famous State House Ugali eating session, Martin Shikuku joined Kenneth Matiba and they walked out of Ford. In order to sort out this problem, the ever-smiling, intelligent, legal mind, now emeritus Amos Wako, decided there was a simple way, in a Solomonic way, of sorting out the Ford issue. Let's register both. Ford Kenya, Simba, and Ford Yasili. Ford Kenya, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. To show how national it was, Jaramogi Aluo had in his team people like Raito Murungi, Gitobi Manyara, Paul Muite, and so on and so forth. People were not Luos. It was a truly national party. But then there was Matiba. Matiba was unwell. At some point, Matiba had been received and given some superficial fake reception to build his image. People say a lot of vehicles parked between the airports and town were special branch vehicles to give the image that he was larger than life. In his first tour of Mount Kenya, people were waiting for him at night. They couldn't go home. And that's how the original Ford was destroyed. When we thought that was enough, somehow and from nowhere, Jeno Kigwoya, gentleman, Mwai Kibaki, I think around Christmas Day of 1990 or thereabouts, came up with the Democratic Party. Matiba, having been part of the destruction of Ford, became the target. Mwai Kibaki came on board, meaning the Matiba was naturally, smoothly, effortlessly going to beat Moi had his Mount Kenya votes split. That is what it was. Needless to say, when the elections came 1992, Moi smiled back to State House. Moi's votes were far less than Matiba's and Kibaki's votes combined. Meaning, even if Matiba alone had stood against Moi, even if Jaramogi and the rest were there, Moi was going to lose. The same played out in 1997 with about 5 political parties. This time it was Mwai Kibaki at the top of the opposition. There was Charity Ngilu, Masaya Mama, SDP. There was Wamalwa Kijana, Jaramogi having died with Ford Kenya. There was Tinga, Jaramogi's son, Engineer Amolo Raila Odinga, with NDP. I think there was another party and a few others. Let's not even begin to say whether there was an election, because they all lost. And Moi, once again, beat the opposition. In 2027, looking at the blunders of the current government, looking at how angry the Kenyan people are, looking at the burden of taxation in this country, looking at the levies imposed on the people of this country, looking at the hunger and the anger in this country, looking at the collapsed healthcare system and the ever-struggling education system, the mess in the education that includes the terrible funding model that is keeping university students out of campus. It's obvious Ruto should be defeated. But where is the man to beat Ruto? Ruto himself has said he can't see anybody. Maybe he's right. So I look at 2027 and I look around and ask Kenyans, you are suffering under the burden imposed by these people, this government. you have votes that can remove Ruto from power. Are you going to do it? I don't see that effort. And therefore, on this 8th day of February 2025, I look at the 2027 and I see Matiang'i struggling with Omtata. I see Jimmy Wanjigi struggling with Kalonzo Musyoka. I look at these struggles and wonder, will they produce a person, one person, strong enough to defeat Ruto? I have a problem arriving at a yes answer. I look at the anger by the Gen Zs. I look at the revolution of June last year and say, is there an individual able to harness the Gen Z anger and drive Ruto out of power? Unfortunately, I don't see that happening. But my worst fear, which I must share with Kenyans today, is that all these candidates are status quo candidates. Just like Moi was able to play around with opposition then, I'm almost convinced, and I see it happening, that these status quo candidates, these system candidates, will be no match to Ruto, for Ruto. In fact, he will play around with all of them. From that mix of 5 or 6 candidates, I will be shocked, not surprised. I will be shocked if 2 or so of them are not Ruto candidates. I will be shocked. Given that all of them are status quo candidates. These are not people who want to see this country in a different way. Ruto must be looking and smiling and wondering, if I'm with Raila in my corner, can Kalonzo really be my match? Because I also look around and say, what strategies are people like Kalonzo putting in place to effectively occupy the opposition space? I see none. Sadly, Kenyans, on this 8th day of February 2025, I'm sad to predict a Ruto victory. Mainly because the people offering themselves for this are a people who Ruto can very easily deal with using any means. So do you want change for this country? If Kenyans want change for this country, they must look beyond the traditional status quo candidate. That way, they could stand a chance against Ruto. Otherwise, you can as well forget.